So we're at the Aiken-Rhett house. This is in South Carolina, Charleston. It is kept preserved, not restored, but preserved to tour. And it has the how it was set up in the 1830s by Governor Aiken. He was one of the richest people in South Carolina, and he had about 800 slaves, 10 to 20 that lived here with him. So we're gonna walk through and see the tour. So we came out of there, over to this room, which is where the slaves would be preparing the meals. Gas lighting put in the 1800s, and they said they installed electricity closer to 1900. So we come out of the servants' hall, and you walk out into the yard. You have the kitchen house and the carriage house. Looking at the house, and they had a call system to call on the slaves, and they would use this system. I'm not sure how it worked, but it would go up and attach to those hooks so they could call for whatever they need. Has some high walls that were built. They built these walls after a revolt was planned, when their slave was planning to revolt. So Aiken decided about 10 years later he would install these tall walls for protection against that. Tour says that was common at that time to build walls like this, but his were a little nicer to make it just more appealing for when they walked around. So looking back at this house, and the kitchen house, and the stables, carriage house, it would have taken several people to keep up to all the standards they wanted. So they said that by the mid-1800s, they usually kept around 10 slaves here, even though they had, hundreds at their other plantations. Okay, so we're gonna enter the main kitchen. It did say they did cook meals in this last room, but that was just for keeping everything up during meals, it says. Now this is where the main meals were being cooked. The stove, they said they kept hot all the time in case the Aikens wanted a meal just randomly. So this stove, even in the middle of the summer, the slaves would have to keep it hot because it would take hours to heat up. Coming into the next room. Head upstairs. Okay, so coming down to the end of that hallway upstairs, this bedroom was for a family of 7 that lived in this room directly above the hot kitchen downstairs. There was another family of 4, they believe, lived in this room. And then as you come down the hall, the wife of Governor Aiken had her own personal slave that lived in this room with her kids. They believed the butler lived in this room, and 30 years after the Civil War was over, there were still basically they were running the same, if I'm understanding this correctly, and you had a butler that was still, the main butler still living in this room now, paid, doing the same job. Okay, so we came out of this door, this downstairs, which was the kitchen, the upstairs, the living quarters, and you could jump over here to the laundry room. Now, the descendants of the slaves that lived here, they say some of the descendants of those slaves still live in Charleston, which is just crazy because, you know, what kind of feeling would you get if you were the descendants and you came here and saw the actual area where your family was enslaved? They would have a real feeling of attachment, to slavery, where the majority of people in the United States have no attachment. We have no idea what that would have been like because that was so many generations ago. So you come into the stable area, and they said that the stableman actually lived upstairs. So those particular slaves that handled the horses would live over here right above the horses. Whereas looking back, laundry to the left and kitchen to the right and the living quarters upstairs for the slaves. So now we'll walk inside and check out the main house. Some boot scrapes at the bottom of the steps before you head in.
Sure.
So coming in that door, make your way into the house. Looking at the side door, and these stairs lead to, well, obviously downstairs, but that's where we started. This was some faux marble that was put up later because of the cost during remodeling to replace the existing marble that had problems. This is part of the call system. These windows, there's shutters on all the windows and some massive, basically doors over the big windows. So this is a giant window, but the windows slide up and create a door to walk outside. These giant pocket doors would slide back to make this a separate room or one large entertaining room. Walk out onto the porch. You can see what I mean by these just awesome giant doors that would basically be like shutters for these windows that also work as a door. So I just stepped down to the garden right below that porch. Had some stairs that led down, and you can only imagine that they probably had slaves down here making this just an absolutely beautiful garden so they could just come down here and walk through. Come up the stairs to come inside the main dining room. Now this main dining room, they would carry trays and trays of food up here to these elaborate gatherings where they'd have 20 or so people in here having several course meals, including ice cream and ham and soup and vegetables and all kinds of elaborate meals that they reset for each portion of the meal. So I just got to say here, I mean, can you just like put it into your mind to think that They've got lights hanging and fireplace going and 20 people in here eating. And you've got these enslaved servants out there in that hot box of a house that they were living in, carrying all that food back and forth from the main kitchen and from that prep room downstairs to bring 20 or so people several course meals. It's just incredible. So you can leave this room and you can come back, and they have their own library in this next room. Okay, so coming out of the library, dining room behind us, coming out of the library. Again, this is looking out to the entertaining room by the porch. And you're back to the door where we came in. So there's the door we came in from outside. You come up, you look out over the yard. And as you walk in this main this main hall, you can see the different lights they used. Electricity came last, and they had some gas before that, and then they had an oil lighting before that. So as you come outside onto this porch, you can actually look out and see the part of the view that they had. This park, they say, was there while they lived here. And these houses this way, they own like 59 rental properties, 7 of which are still standing. So you can actually stand here right where they were standing and kind of see the view that they would have had. So this door we just came in. So you got a bathtub over here, and to think that they were calling on the slaves to boil water and run it over to the house to dump it in here to take a bath, while the slaves had nothing more than a little sitz bath to take their showers. Now the governor's wife, she lived here through all this time with slavery, raising 5 kids, through the Civil War, still had the servants after the war. And of course, at that time they were just paid, but she had them functioning, doing the same jobs. And then she was here all the way till she died in the 1900s. So that is Harriet. And that was their art room. They like to travel abroad, went over to Europe and purchased all kinds of artwork while they were over there and brought it back with them. Aiken-Rhett house from 1820. And those first couple houses over there are a couple of the other houses they owned. And this is the park that was there when they lived there. Serious history right there.